Okay, so this is a new series that I'm starting called The Evolution of One. Just me having conversations and expanding my understanding with different people that I meet. Roll the intro.
I will run, I will rise, I will grow like the world's never known.
Alright, today I am talking with my friend Oscar Tijerina. We work together and I've known him for many years. I completely respect him as a designer, as a product developer, and just had a conversation. He's actually the person who got me to start doing this, to record these conversations. With COVID happening, a lot of people that I used to hang out with and see at work and whatnot, they reached out and we kept having conversations, and so many good conversations. And one of the things I realized about myself is I process things as I talk. I think that's why I started this channel. That's why I started this whole thing, is I process while I talk, and there's so many, I'd be having conversations with friends and there's so many nuggets of wisdom, just these really things I'd be like, man, that was so good, I wish I was recording it. And he was just kind of like, oh, you should just start recording these conversations. And so this is the start of that. This is not being afraid to start something new, and here's the first one. Before what we get into, we talk a lot, him and I talk a lot about product design. We talk specifically about the new UgMonk release of Analog, a new physical task-taking product that I think is incredible. Him and I are both fans. I've been fans for several years of what Jeff over at UgMonk has been doing. And so we talk about that. And it's a lot about product design in general. So yeah, enjoy.
Okay. You got me on this thing. You got me wanting to have these conversations. What did you think of the mastermind jam session?
Oh, good. Yeah, I was distracted because I was like multitasking, but it was nice to listen to it. It felt like I was listening to like an audiobook or a podcast, something. Like I just like listen to people's stories and stuff, but I don't think I was like engaged as normal. So next time I'll be more the word is once again, only slept like 4 hours last night, so I'm a little off, but I'll be more engaged next time probably. I was working on that video. I don't know if you ended up seeing the final version, but
yeah, it turned out really good.
I didn't get to like, there's still pieces I wanted to do, and so the team was like, well, if you want another day, and I was like, you know what, like the stuff that's left are things that only I'm gonna notice or care about. So, and I have so much to do right now that I think it's good enough. Like I wanted, like there's little things, like I wanted some, like I didn't like how it started with no audio at all at the beginning. So I wanted to correct that, and I didn't have like an ending necessarily, and so I wanted to change the way, like something a little better the way it ended, and then that I had lost the drop shadow on the phone itself was off, and a couple other little visual details were like I hadn't had a chance to come back and fix it. So I was like, you know what? No one's gonna care or notice any of this. Like it's got everything it needs. So I'm gonna stop now.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to just ship something. Just be like, you know what? We're just gonna go. Always things that you can improve and add to, but
yeah, I think we've touched on this in the past. It's like you can't let that fear of like, as much as that like desire to be perfect is awesome, and like putting the amount of thought into these little details that make a difference, there's also that cost of diminishing returns, where it's like, hey, this is good enough, and the longer I delay this, the shipping of this or putting this out into the world, like what's really, is it really worth that? And I think that I had already put enough thought into the details I wanted, or like, the general sense of what I was looking for there, that it met overall the level of polish I was looking for. It was just these really other things, and especially given how much time I had, like how little time I had and how much was on my plate, I was like, I don't think a single person is going to look at this and think it's bad. Like, whereas someone who's really talented would be like, oh, I wish there was a little more of a drop shadow here, but it's that no one would ever be into like, oh, this is really bad. So I was like, all right, well, as long as I'm not putting out something bad, I think the overall quality of it is actually pretty decent. So I'm happy with that. I need to just call it.
Yeah, it's always a hard decision to make that call, but I totally know what you mean.
It's
Hey,
yeah.
I was gonna say, have you seen the analog from Jeff Sheldon, the
Oh
hook
yeah,
mod?
I did. Uh-huh. Yeah, actually, I guess because I think I told you this before, but because I'm one of the early, like super early adopter people, like I'm on the email list, so I got like a preview of something like a while back, or I don't know when it was. If you did, it's all blur right now because of school, but so I had kind of had a glimpse of it, and then when it launched, I've just been so busy. I think you sent me the link too, and I was like, oh, I kind of seen this, but I haven't like really looked at it because he didn't have the whole video. It just was like you saw a picture, I think, of it or something, and so I knew more or less what it was, but not in detail. And then last night when I took a break to use the bathroom at like 2 a.m., I watched the video. When I was
It's a
not in the
good
bathroom.
video.
When I was walking back, I was like, yeah, it came out really good. As I remember he was posting stuff about like setting up the cameras and lighting questions on Twitter or something, and so
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay, so it was all that, and yeah, it came out really good. There's yeah, it was impressive. What do you think of the like? Well, one, actually, I didn't even answer your question, but I'll come back to it. What do you think of the thing? Did you order one? And second, we'll talk about the video because I want to get your thoughts on that.
Um, yeah, I thought it was incredible. I pre-ordered or backed it. Absolutely. I thought that the concept was really cool, and it actually made me. I have these like I've had my own prototypes of stuff for my kids that were kind of along the same lines. There's
Uh-huh.
like different charts that we do, and I was like, oh man, it'd be cool like seeing his stuff and making it simple like that. I'm like, oh, I could do something similar like that. I don't know that I'll ever get to it, but it made me. I just respect his one, his ability to put out stuff. Two, the the level of craftsmanship that goes into everything he does. Not just what he makes, but like his curations and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
He just makes really great choices,
Yeah.
and I really appreciate that. And I wanted to give it a shot. Honestly, it's like I started almost exactly what he has. I was doing in notes for work,
Yep.
and so I'm like, yeah, like I have wanted to do because I've tried writing down things because it's that tactical thing, and he has a whole system behind it. I'm like, I want to try it. I definitely want. I don't have a great system now. I have enough that I'm able to like do a lot. I actually execute on a lot of my ideas, but absolutely, I feel like I can refine it and get better. And so I liked the simplicity of it, and it's you know beautiful, and so I was all for it.
Um, so like I was looking at it last night and I decided not to order it only, and it's going to be really dumb, but only because I'm holding out for a a different stain or color of wood. Um, it's like an oak kind of
Yeah,
color, but the what's the little the organizing base, the gather.
gather.
My
Yeah,
gather system is, and most of the other things are very, like everything I have right now on my desk at home is like more of a natural like light colored wood and whites, and so it wouldn't really fit with the aesthetic. And so I was like, I'm gonna hold off because it wouldn't fit here visually, and I think Dad would appreciate that to some extent. Although I'm sure he'd rather I order one, but I was like, I just don't have a good place for it. Maybe at my desk at work, but who knows when I'll get back to that. So
Yeah.
so I was like, I'm just gonna wait for now. Unfortunately, it looked like they were doing really well, but I was like, man, I want to see it in a lighter color, or I would love to see that base done like in a white ceramic. Uh, would be dope. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a little white ceramic base with those same cards would probably. Well, I don't know if you have to change the color of the cards. I really don't. I don't know if they were like browns or gray. I think they're probably grays. I can't remember because they're different shades. I think I only saw it like for the 2 minutes of, but I was like, man, it would be really nice if that base was white. I would pay for a premium if it was like a heavy, like even if it was like a handmade-ish kind of like not perfect little, sculpture of a base. If it was like a white ceramic, I would be all over that. But yeah, at least if it was a lighter wood, I think I would have pulled the trigger.
Yeah, I actually, when you say that, I'm like, man, I almost feel like I'm surprised it wasn't like an extended like base on Gather.
Yeah,
Like
right,
I don't know, maybe it didn't even lay flat, like maybe it tilted so it could still stay within the grid that he has, but
right.
and I was thinking too, I'm like, I wonder if that has like a magnet and sticks to the side, like the he has, pieces that bolt on. I just thought that would be interesting if it was a happy, you know, connection. If you had both, they could play together, kind of thing.
Yeah, I guess you'd have to reimagine the Gather as a part two, but it'd have to go like long ways, and then maybe you have a slit for the card to sit up in the center, even though the rest of the cards are over here. Like there's like I don't know, but actually now I think about it, you know, if it was the gather base and then a small slit for the cards, you could actually put your two or three up at the same time in front of you, like the today that I forgot what they were. Like I only watched it like really quickly in the middle of the night, but up next and like
Today,
long term.
next, and someday.
Yeah, there you go.
Today, next day, and someday.
Someday, yeah. So I was like, yeah, actually, if it was this way and the cards were just like a module that sat back there, but there was a place you could put, the today and tomorrow. I guess the whole point is just have the one. But anyway, I liked it. Oh, sorry, you missed me. What do you think of what were your thoughts when you saw the video? Like, I mean, we already said it looked good, but like anything specific? I felt like the shots, the pans, like it was all really good.
Yeah. I only watched it once, so I feel like if I would have known you were gonna ask the question, I'd go back and rewatch it and really like
That's better this
look
way.
through it.
Yeah.
But dude, I thought it was incredible. I thought uh, it was so well executed, so well executed.
Yeah.
In every piece of it was just so strong. Like, um, I mean, I I feel like I'm such a fan of his work. He to me is like, I've said this so many times before. Like the Ugmug brand to me is the gold standard of what a company should be like. Like absolutely, like hands down, personal. He's like incredible design. Like I respect him as an artist. I respect him as a business person. And I respect him as a human. It's like from every aspect of it. Like I just think he and the way that he runs everything is just, man, so good. So the story, I think a lot of the things that stood out that were really good was it's not just like here's a thing. Like he talks about the who he is, introduces the product, and then he gives an understanding of like first off, why did he even do this? He's like, I
Yeah.
tried all these different things, and he's like putting all these things on, and it's like nothing really worked. And he's like, it's another thing that he grounds it in like, hey, this isn't just my idea. and he has that stack of books, right? And he's like, this is
Yeah.
from, I've looked at all these other things and pulled out my own thing. Wasn't just I sat down and was like, hey, I'm gonna make something. It was, he tried all these other systems and they just weren't the right thing for him. And he created this new, really minimal approach. I loved just the subtle things that he did, like the animations of when he's talking about how the system works, and it has like the thing that highlights over it, and then the dots,
Yeah.
and he rolls through each piece. So like in that whole video, which is not long, it's like 2 or 3 minutes, you connect with him, you connect with the brand, you see the backstory, you see how the product works, and he ends in and is like, you just like connect with him again. I just felt
Right.
like the whole way through is really good.
So he does something interesting that and once again, like you, I only saw it once, and I wasn't really. I'd been up for like 20 something hours, so my recollection's not perfect, but I don't even know
Watching it again
if
now.
the actual um like product itself is displayed in the first half of the video. Um, it he does something that I talk about a lot at work, and I do when I'm interacting at work, like, and even not as much as I'd like to be honest. But it's like he focused on the story and the problem first, and like you don't actually see, at least. I mean, maybe they show it at the beginning, but you don't really get it.
No,
He doesn't really
I'm
go
watching
into
it.
it until like 3/4 of the way. Like it's almost like 75% of the way through before the actual thing is shown. And because I remember thinking, like, wait, he hasn't actually shown it yet. And for a minute I was like, well, hurry up, like let's get to it. But the other part of me was like, no, actually, this is smart. This is the way you should be doing it. Um, to your point, it really invests you in the why. And I think people tend to jump to the like, here it is. This is this amazing thing. It does this for you. Now let me tell you the story
Mm-hmm.
of it. And that's not as compelling. Like you start with the compelling. You heard the story and the meaning behind something, and what problems you're trying to solve, and what worked and didn't work, and you start like saying like, here's the thing, and here are the iterations, and like this didn't work because of this, and this didn't work, and so you start saying like, oh, okay, well you need to solve for this, and you can't be that, and it can't be this thing, and it can't, so that when you get to your reveal, when you show the product, it's like, and you start explaining the points, it's like, and this is how you use it. It does this, and you're like, oh, that mitigates this. This mitigates this. This solves this, and you're like, I see how this thing like is the perfect choice, as opposed to you see a product and you immediately start questioning like, well, I really wish that it had this over here and this over there. I mean, it's nice, but like, I want to be able to see like 3 cards at once, and then later they go and explain something, but you've already started like poking holes. You're already not bought in, and so I think talking through the iterations and getting to the point of like, oh yeah, trying to organizing and staying focused on just the most important tasks is like the primary goal here. Then when you buy into that and you like follow that line of thinking, when you see that it's presented in a way that it's like one primary card, you're like, oh, that's the way it should be. You're not in a place where you see the thing and you're questioning like, well, I really want to see tomorrow's and the next day's all at one time. Like maybe some people are, but I think overall, like it builds for you so that when you get the answer, you're like, I saw the math. Like I know it was 1 + 1 + 2 + 3. Like the answer is 6, and you're showing me a 6. Like that makes sense to me, as opposed to like, hey guys, here's a 6. Come buy this thing. Oh, let me tell you and yeah, I think immediately you're like, well, wait, how did you get the 6? Because I would have been like 1 + 3 + 2 + 5, like, and then you start kind of like pushing back from the start. You're like in this negative. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I think the way that he does it, going back to what you're talking about specifically around story, is you really follow his story, and just like when he started down this road, he didn't know what the ending was. He didn't start going, I'm going to make a new product. This is the area. It was him as a business owner just going, I really want to get better at this thing. And he invests all the, and so you don't get the reveal because he didn't have the reveal. And
Right.
you like, so there's different story, like there's different ways to do the story. There's definitely the story where it's like you start at the end and then you work backwards to it. And I think that works. I think you can have a reveal, like here's the thing, and then now I'm gonna take you back to the beginning. Like those stories work too. It's just it all depends on the style of the person and the way that you are able to do it. I think, like you were saying, the way that he approached it, it builds anticipation because you land on the Kickstarter, you see the finished product, the book, like Star Wars, but you're like, oh, you start with Luke in as a kid on a farm and he can't do what he wants, kind of thing, and like you follow it to get to that point, and it's also like his story of like why should this even exist, and him trying all these other things, and then you also see him like other people using it. It's not like this was just him putting it out for the first time. There was you get the sense of he had research, he actually had a prototype, you actually see the prototype before you see the final product, you see other people working with it, and then halfway through the video you finally get to see this thing, and then you see how it works. And so like half of it is just the anticipation and the buildup of why this should even exist and who am I, and then the second half is the education of this new system that he put into place. And there's also this room of like, I like how he's like, or make up your own system. There's like these, you don't live by these rules. Like,
I mean, at the end of the day, he's selling something you can do with 3 pieces of paper, right?
Yeah.
But it's selling like mad cakes right now, right? Or he's hitting like these crazy numbers already because it is so well thought out and it's presented in such a great way that it's like, like if I need to, this isn't so complex. Like I could just do 3 pieces of paper, but it's sort of like I'm willing to pay for that whole package altogether, which is great. Like, if you try to, if Kickstarter didn't exist and you went to a bank and like, I want a loan so that I can sell people a system where they write on 3 pieces of paper and put it in a tray. Like, I mean, like what? Like, who's gonna buy that? They used it themselves. No, like there's more to it than that. But without getting into like real like deep specifics, I find that just like at work when let's say like I'm trying to get an idea and I need to get to in front of like legal or security or someone for some kind of approval before we can push out to the next stage. What I was doing when I saw others do was show up and it was always like, oh hey, so we're building this thing, here's what it looks like, yada yada yada, it's going to work with this system, and can you just let us know, like, we need to get an approval for this, so like what are the issues you see? And they start going, well, and they start like sort of like digging in and all these like random things, and it was always like ultimately it would end up hurting the experience. And what I found is like I'm going to spend the first 10 minutes of what I feel like a burning of 10 minutes, but I'm going to walk you through the problem and what we learned as fast as I can. Like, hey, so, we were called in because this issue over here, what we saw was this happening. We looked into it some more, and that, this is the way the process works. So, and I stair step them through as fast as I can from start to like the story of that thing. And then I will say, so here's what we did. And so now when those individuals are looking at it, they're looking at it in context of the user problem that we're trying to solve and all the other iterations and why that thing is done this specific way. That we put all this thought into it. They don't have the context. And so it changes the way that they respond back. And I think the same is probably true of consumers, but like, it's like you get this like buy-in and appreciation for these choices. And you're like, oh, I see. Okay. I'm good with that now, where if you hadn't explained those things, I would have said without knowing anything about this subject that I wanted it this way. And before it was that, and trying to rewind backwards after somebody's already like when they start seeing holes from the start, they like can't. They're just like, nope, it should be like this, and they start just.
Yeah.
They're not even listening at that point because they're like, nope, this is how it should be. Anyway, sorry, I'm drawing like my own tangent here to something that I've seen over and over again, and I mean even the those competition things at work, like every single one of the ones that I would win, they bring in for coaching and stuff for the other people later, and I would tell them like I'd watch other ones, and I'm like, most people spend 80% of their time talking about their solution and 20% talking about the problem, and it's backwards. Spend like 80% of your time talking about the problem and what you like, how did you get there? And then when you get to, you don't have to explain as much because people are like, got it, got it, got it. Like you've answered all the questions and they're on board so much faster. It's like, oh, this is a really great implementation because it solves all these things as opposed to the other way around. Anyway, I think there's something there.
Yeah, I agree. It's funny because uh, when I talk to people about at work, some of the stuff that I'm doing, they're always just like, man, how do you get to do that stuff? And I'm like, I really do. I feel like I do have a lot of freedom. I get to do things that not a lot of people get to do. And I think it comes down to the exactly what you're saying. It gets all in the how you're able to sell something in a way that like these are just people that you have to connect that story with of why you think this project deserves to exist. And I've been fortunate enough to be able to draw enough logic and reason behind the stories that I pitch that most projects get funded and
Right.
can move forward. And if they don't, a lot of times it's, I mean, I feel like you're really good at this too. It's like, oh, like help me understand these pieces that you're struggling with, and then you go back and you address them.
Yep.
And then it's like, oh, well, yeah, now I'm on board. Like you answered the burning questions that I had. Like,
Yeah.
it's even
So
if it's
like,
not the first time, I completely agree with what you're saying is that people need the context, and most of the time you're able to have a lot more freedom than you realize.
yeah, you bring up an interesting point. I've been working on something right now that involves, it's going to impact a lot of people. And, um, a lot of individuals that I would interact with would sort of say like, oh, just go figure out all the things and, uh, make your recommendation and let's just enforce it and people will just do that. And I'm like, yeah, but you're going to hit, I can tell you right now, these individuals in these areas are going to have all kinds of pushback. And they're like, well, tough on them. We'll deal with that when we get there. And I'm like, that's a slow road. Instead, like I'm trying to tell, like, uh, to me, it's like, no, I know who the smartest and most vocal people are. And the moment I start circling an idea, I'm going to flock to them first because then I can say, hey, this is in its rough stages. So set the ground rules, don't judge it too harshly. But also, what are your worries? What are your concerns? Because I know that they're going to be the harshest critics. And so they're going to start poking at things that either A are valid and I need to solve. Like I'm like, oh, that's a good point. I need to be aware of that. Or B, I need to understand like why I can't do that and have a reason for that. So that when we get to a point, if we're doing it and it does like not meet that like point, at least I can talk to why in an intelligent way. So to me, it's like getting that. It's not even buy-in. It's like getting those people to like talk through it and share earlier in that process um, is way more beneficial. But the other thing that you talked about, I don't think you touched on though, is when people ask you that, is you do something that most people don't, which is you actually ask if you can do things. Most people just stand around waiting for. I saw my wife has this little board and she sticks all these like sticky notes and things that she needs to get done on the wall. Um, And I was walking out the other day, the office of the other day, and I looked at the thing, and there was this sticker or this sticky note, and I would tweak the wording a little bit, but it was something like, don't ask permission to lead, just lead. um, for me, it's like, don't ask permission to do the right thing, just do the right thing. But
Yeah.
either way, um, it's like, just, I don't know.
Well, I think it's actually like the reverse. It's that I just assume that I can do the thing, right?
Yeah.
It's and I think that's what you're saying. But the wording is, I think,
Well,
important. Is that I just assume that if
yeah,
it's
you're
a good
right.
idea that's going to help them solve their problem, like they're going to want to hear about it. So I might as well just pitch it. Like,
What's it gonna hurt?
yeah,
But also, I also found, like, especially when I came to the department, there's so many things where I would hear about something cool happening, and I would just go over there and be like, "Hey, this seems like that." That's how I met you. Is I heard about one of the things you were working on, and I don't know how detailed we can get on these things, so I'll keep it vague. But like, before we knew each other, I had heard or seen about something that sounded interesting, and I just went up and said, "Hey, this sounds kind of cool. Do you need help? Can I help with this?" And like, you were like, "Oh, sure, like, no big deal, like, come do this thing." And it was a really fun and rewarding process, and I do that a lot. And I at one point I would get others would be like, "Man, how do you keep getting all this?" I'm like, "Because I went over there and said, this is cool, can I?" Or
yeah,
I hear them talking about an incoming project, and I'd be like, "Oh, that's really interesting. Hey, if you need someone, um, you know, let leadership know. Like, I'm totally interested to do this." And next thing I know, I'm on that one. They did be like, "Oh, hey, can we get a Oscar on this thing?"
yeah,
Uh, and so they'd be like, "Oh, sure. I mean, he's got the bandwidth." Like, and so I end up would be on all these great things because I like said, "Hey, like, if you need help, like, can I help with this thing? I don't need to be in charge of all the stuff, but this sounds really great." And so often it's stuff that's like not even part of my core job, but um, that's what keeps me motivated is these little things. But most people just sit there and just wait to be told what to do, and then they complain about, like, "Oh, I never get the good stuff."
yeah,
Well, it's like, I mean, I'm only on the things I'm on because I went and asked for it. Like, I didn't do
yeah,
anything special. I didn't like fight for it. I just said, like, "Oh, hey, does anyone mind if I help with this?" "Yeah, I got my other stuff under control." And they're like, "Cool, go for it then." I'm like, "All right." And
yeah,
you make the like you have some ownership over what it is that you're able to kind of do, at least within our roles. I think I don't know if everyone always has that flexibility. I think you do to some extent, though, no matter what. I think
that's what I was
people
gonna
are
say. Like
surprised.
even before I came down into the area, when I was in the project delivery area where we were just given projects, it's just kind of like, and I think it's part of like, this is why I think you and I get along a lot, is we have very similar personalities. But it's like whatever I'm on, I'm interested in like understanding the core of what they're trying to solve, because a lot of times, even if it's something where I'm like, I don't really know that I agree with that, so I'll ask, I'll get to the core, and I'll be like, oh well, actually this over here I think solves better than this. And then it just goes back to being like having that discussion and being like, oh yeah, like a lot of times, even though that you're given a project that seems here's where it's going, if you just ask questions, you'll realize that most things were just a general idea by someone that just like go solve something. And so if you just have logic behind it, that you're like, I think this, if this is the problem we're trying to solve, here's an option that I think could be just as relevant. And more
Yep.
times than not, I just find people being like, yeah, we'll tweak it, we'll turn it. And so most projects that I'm on end up, you know,
Right.
getting turned into a new thing because of I have a unique way of viewing different the world, and I can use that to my advantage to be like, oh, well, why don't we do this thing?
But
So
also, you take the initiative to ask the questions, and the vast majority of people do not do that. And
yeah,
that the example I would always give was, um, in most cases, your boss tells you, like, "Hey, I need you to go over there and mop the floor in that area over there," and you're like, "All right, yes, sir." And you go over there and you mop the floor, and then you run back and you're like, "Done, sir." Like, "Oh, great job, you did it really quickly," and that's the end of the interaction. Um, and then the alternative of that is they say, hey, I need you to mop the floor over there. And you go, oh, yes, sir, no problem. Oh, by the way, is there a reason you wanted me to mop just that specific area? And they're like, oh, yeah, someone slipped and fell on that banana peel over there. And that's where they landed. And it's like, oh, well, while I'm there, do you want me to just pick up this banana peel? And they're like, oh, actually, that's way better. Just pick up the banana peel. Don't even worry about this other thing. Like, it just takes a minute to say, like, why do you want to do that thing, right? It's like people just blindly assume that, like, it's like there's nothing wrong with asking the questions. I think the other thing I did wrong in the past too, though, was I asked the questions, but then I was also sort of unwilling to compromise, or like if it wasn't if I said, like, we want to get that banana peel, it's right there, and they're like, nope, like, I don't care about that. I'm like, yeah, but they're gonna slip again, and they're like, nope, and I'm like, I would have big issues with this, and I caused all kinds of problems to the point where people didn't want to work with me, and I learned over time that depending on the situation, sometimes you need to just let it go for a minute, and then circle back on it is a much faster route of getting there. It's asking, just like always kind of being positive and approaching it from, like, I'm here to help you, like, we're on the same team, and at the end of the day, what role do I play? And it's not necessarily to make that call. Like, it's your job to make that call. I'm going to point stuff out. I'm going to ask some questions, and your job to make that decision. And hopefully I can make a case for that, but I had to be okay with that part of it as part of it. And then I found that when I said, hey, what about that? And they say no. And then I do it. I'm like, okay, no big deal. Like, I pointed it out. Like, I might push on it again if I think it's really dumb, but whatever. I'll stay positive. I go mop the floor, and then the next person falls. And I'm like, okay, hey, so somebody fell again. I'm going to go start mopping, but I really think that banana peel. Like, are you sure you don't want me to? And at that point, they're like, okay, yeah, go ahead and get it. And as soon as I give in the first time on something that's, like, kind of small, then the second time the recommendation gets taken typically, and even then, the next interaction when something similar happens, I can jump straight to, like, oh, well, while I'm doing that, do you want me to just? They're like, they start to trust more that I'm actually thinking through it, and they're like, all right, you're usually, like, you're on the right track. Just handle it. Like, however you think, I trust you now. Because over time, I'm always kind of positive. I show that I'm on the team with them, and little by little, I think it gets you to. It's a slower ramp up rate, but a longer sustained, like a higher overall success over a longer period of time. Like, you get to a higher level of quality faster, even though it's a slower. It's like one is like immediate results, and then it just levels out at like a mediocre level. And then another one is like a slow burn, and then it goes to a really high, and then you're able to, like, sort of stay at a really high level once you develop that relationship with people,
I think another thing too that you bring up that it made me think of is, and I think I've seen you do this too. I think, like, you and I both would say, like, would we approach something? It's like, I don't necessarily think I know everything or that my idea is right. I'm just trying to, like, I'm challenging my thinking and your thinking, and I'm totally fine being wrong. Like, help me realize, like, the error in my thinking. And a lot of times when you have pushback from that person, maybe my thinking is wrong, and you go and start talking to other people, and then, especially when you start thinking about people that influence them, the peers, and then they're taking it to them and going, I think that there's this issue. And when it's not coming from necessarily you, but it's coming from a group of people going, we've been talking about this for a little bit. It starts to change the mind of the person when it's not just one person, or even if it's not just that person talking to you, it's someone that they are friends with. Like, if you want to get to, communicate with someone, a lot of times it's those gatekeepers that you talk with them and influence them. And it's not like manipulating people. It's more of just like realizing how to, either you're wrong, and I would like to figure out where the error is that I'm thinking, and these other people might be able to shed light in a way that this main person wasn't able to explain it to me. Like, maybe their communication at the time just wasn't, impactful enough. or B, they agree with you and then they'll take it and, help to, then it's not one on one, and it's not, this person bringing it to you again. It's, someone that they trust kind of coming up to it. One of the things that I wanted to come back and circle back to, that you talked about was when people, I talked about this, I put out a video a week or two ago about, the Black Lives Matter and a lot of the stuff that's going on. And I talked about, as I was, for me, I felt like I'm just like an active listener at this point. Like I'm trying to listen to what people have to say and try to really understand why people are hurting. And one of the things that I said that I think that comes back to what we're talking about is I said, there was this moment where I had people that disagreed with my thinking, talking with me and saying that they were doing the whole like all lives matter thing. And my first reaction was like, I don't have time for these people. Like, I don't want to listen to them. And I was like, oh no, I need to hear what they have to say. And I need to be open to have a conversation. Otherwise it's just two parties that aren't listening at all. And so as much as I like really didn't want, like, if they're saying those things, it's like, you're not getting it. And I'm like, okay, I have to, like, that is my role, is to like take a breath and be like, okay, like I didn't want to listen to you, but like that means that indicates to me that like I really need to listen to what you have to say, because
Right.
to what you were saying, I think the real value is in understanding all the different pieces, and it's a collection of the voices together that helps you understand the problem to be able to move forward. And a lot of times we get in our ways and we don't want to hear people that don't
Yep.
agree with us, and it's really hard. It's really
There is
challenging.
such a deep level of irony in the fact that America, that is based its identity on this like freedom of speech, the culture has now become um, to a point where we are actively asking people not to talk about subjects that may be difficult. Like, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, don't talk about these, because you don't want to upset people. And we're turning into this like place where we're like actively discouraging these interactions. And I don't know if you've heard me rant about this, but the other piece of it that like I feel is a big contributor is technology, especially in the scope of personalization. So as we've gotten deeper into personalization and all of the tracking stuff happening and like this content being delivered that's like curated for you by these algorithms, what in combination with our like cultural sort of stance in which we don't talk about difficult subjects now, what you get is, whether you're active on social media especially, but even if you're not, if you do a search for even just like Trump and a specific topic, depending on what you've looked at previously, you're going to get a very different story. You're going to say, hey, on this subject, Trump is amazing, or, oh, on this subject, Trump is the worst person ever. And so over and over, and then you're either avoiding those conversations with people that conflict with you, or you're only having the conversation with people that agree with you. And so all you're getting fed is one narrative over and over that's just like 100% on one side, and you're no longer receiving any information from the other side that's saying like, oh no, like this is actually the right thing because of this and this and this and this. And so you get to a point where you start seeing other people say stuff, you don't talk to them about it, and you're like, how could they be saying that? He did this, then this, then this, then this. There's no way that is like, how could they even come to this conclusion? It makes you more and more frustrated, and it like bubbles up. And the same thing's happening on the other side. And they're like, oh my God, how do you guys not see what's happening here? It's this, because they're getting fed all of this, and the other side's getting fed all of this, and there's no more of the mixture happening.
Yeah.
And it just becomes this like massive cluster. And I think it all comes down once again to like we could at least mitigate some of this by talking about it, by actively, and it ultimately comes down to fear. It's fear that we're going to upset someone, that we're not able to have an intelligent conversation that respects someone else's ideas and says, hey, like, I think this for these reasons. Tell me about what you like. I don't know if we're going to agree, but at least we can understand each other. And I think when you do that, you get to a better place. Like you're able to sort of say, oh, well, maybe the answer is this, that, like, you're looking for this and I'm looking for this. And it doesn't have to be like, there may be more of a middle ground, but instead we're drawing these like hard lines in the sand on subjects. And then it's just doubling down and it's boiling over. It's getting worse and worse to where it's people are getting so frustrated. They're like exploding with like they're holding it in, and finally like, oh my god, like we need to go stop this. Like someone's got to speak up, and
Yeah.
it's like,
I
yeah,
it's I think it comes down to I don't remember who said this quote. I was trying to look it up. I think it might have been Aristotle, but he said it's the mark of an educated mind to be able to hear something I'm getting this wrong, but to hear something that you don't agree and not have and not just accept it. It's like to be able to hear things that you disagree with, but not judge it, to just be able to like hear it and try it on. Like, I could be wrong. Like that's to be able to hear the contrary to what you believe and not have to believe it.
right,
Is and that's what is going back when you build up the separation on each side, you're giving no room to hear and accept the possibility of another side. And you don't have to, like, it doesn't mean that you have to believe it. Like, just listening to what someone says doesn't mean that you have to, like, that has to be what you own.
right,
But you need to be able to have the open mind enough to be able to accept what they're saying and really, really have it sink in versus listening to talk to you. Like, I'm giving you time to say what you need, but I really just know what I need to say. Being able to switch that and really accept and let it sit there. I think that's where we need to get to, is acceptance of being wrong, or it's not even right or wrong. It's just like understanding another person's viewpoint that gives them the backstory to why they say what they say.
yeah. You don't know what you don't know, and you may be totally valid in your line of thinking given the experiences and information that you have been provided in your life right now in this moment, but you are limited by those same experiences or what you're able to see. And until you are having a conversation with people that can provide perspectives into these additional data elements, there's no way you can have any like logical argument that you are correct. You need to like actively seek those interactions and get that data in order to, if your goal is to actually have a to feel like you're on the right track, doing the right thing, or looking at it from the right way, coming to the correct conclusion, you can't do that without finding like understanding inherently what the argument against it is in its full extent,
Yeah.
and realizing that like there is no like opinion that is not valid. Everyone's opinion is valid, whether you agree with it or not. Like it's a real thing. Someone feels that way, and it should be acknowledged. And whether or not it's the majority or whether it's a problem that needs to be solved, that's a different question. But like, you, man, like for people to make such this like decisive statements about things that they have very little to no experience or knowledge of is just insane. People will double down on things that like they're like arguing for stuff when they've never had to experience the alternative or been in those shoes or actively
Yeah.
spoken to someone who's had to deal with it and built that empathy or that perspective to understand why the other people are. I mean, man, it's scary. It's frustrating and it's scary actually, because I don't know how you get out of this.
Well, I think part of the problem, I don't know if this is everything, but I think just the abolishment of the idea of good versus evil, like good and bad. I think it goes back full circle to what we were talking about at the beginning of trying to get to, a 10,000 or 1 million number, right? There's many combinations that you can add up to get there. And it's going, oh, how did you get there? I think this goes back to you and I have talked about this, like how I'm just fascinated at people, but I know that you have shared this too about how people work. Like you'll sit and watch another designer do something and be like, oh, you got there doing this way. Oh, and I got here doing, and that's exactly what we need. Like there's not like this one way to do things in life. It's like,
Right.
oh, you got there this way, and that makes sense because of the backstory you have. And we're not willing to put in the time to like understand. And it is a lot. Like it's not even it's a lot. Like you have to be in the right mindset to be able to have those conversations. And like both parties need to, but I think it's that same sense of there's not one way to create an object in Illustrator, right? There's so many different
Yes.
fabrications that you can come in and like, oh, I did it in this program and then brought it into this program and then I think it's the same thing in life. It's that there's so many permutations of
Yep.
how you can live that I'm just want to know, like, give me the step by step. What did you add up to get here? And then, like, oh, okay, I see how you got there. All right.
Right.
And I think that's to me, that's one of the things. It's this trying to like, yeah, I think live in extremities, like, hot and cold. It's like the real solutions are in how you play in the gray. It's how you
Yeah.
fluctuate in between the two and regulate the two. Like
That's a
that I
harder
think
place
is
to be
powerful.
in. Like, and I think if I'm going to put it in context, like, I'll switch your design context a little bit and just talk about like web or graphic design for a minute and say that like when you start as a in design, whether you're doing it professionally or just something you're passionate about, like the goal at the beginning is understanding the rules, the good and bad. Like, hey, things should align to a grid. Like, these are the colors that work best off each other, and like knowing what the fundamental, like, yes, good, bad, like, stay, like, this is the things you should be doing, the general rules that are considered to be correct,
Mm,
and then and you use that, and then over time, once you build mastery of that understanding, that's when you're able to evolve to a point in which you can start to dissect and play in the gray. It's not you
I like
can't
that.
do that until you have and and so I think people are going to start their lives thinking in a black and white, and I think it's up to them whether they decide to take that step to start looking for the gray within themselves. But I think you're right; it's in the middle, but um,
It's an evolution. Yeah, it's
but
not
you
an
have to first
abolishment.
you have to
Yeah,
know what the boundaries are.
yeah,
This is fundamentally the good or the bad in general, as a basis, and then from there you start to really start playing with that, and you're
yeah.
saying like,
Why is that
okay,
good?
here's
Why is
where
that bad?
this
Yeah.
can actually be a little more here, and this can, but it's really complicated, and it takes, I think it's like trial and error, but like whether it's just basics of like public speaking, like what, don't say ums and ahs or fiddle with stuff, is bad things. Make sure that you're putting your story in the right order is a good thing. But then there's if you want to take it from like that gets you to good, if you understand good and bad, you could be like, you're like, all right, I could be okay with this. People aren't going to look at me poorly. But the great stuff is always in the gray. It's the ones that understand the nuances of the finer details and where you can plug in those pieces and say, all right, in combination with just the generalities of the good and bad, it's the order and the subtext of the words I'm using in the play, like
Yeah.
tying back to what we were talking about before with the presentation, like it all, like to get to great, it's always in that gray area, and it's like multiple facets have to be in the gray area for that to work, and you have to understand. But I think it comes from this fundamental black and white basis at the beginning, where you're just trying to wrap your head around it.
Do you remember Jordan Rizzo? who used to work in the department.
No.
He's a French guy. I miss him so much. He was so cool. But he wrote a paper on the evolution of the mind and how a lot of people don't evolve past the childlike state of mind. And that's what the educational level, and this is what you're talking about, is the black and white is really that parent-child relationship. And a lot of people are full adults that go to work and live in a parent-child relationship. And they don't really get out of that. And it's exactly what you're saying, is that's like phase one. And then the evolution of it is the ability to play in the gray. It's the ability to question things and realize that, oh, sometimes bad is good and good is bad, and recognize when those are the cases. It was a really interesting paper. It's just, I really like that. It was the becoming a full mental adult was different than just you age to physically be the age of an adult, and making that separation. And you just start seeing that, you're like, oh wow, yeah, some people do get stuck in that chasm. And I like what you're saying. I think it goes on the same time. It's not about abolishing good and bad. It's that, like, those get us one step, and then there's you're evolving, and then even inside of that, there's more evolutions that your mind can make that can counter things. And I really do think that it's about evolving the human nature. Like, us as humans are evolving as a species. Getting to a better place is the end goal.
Well, if you're gonna keep recording these, you should totally reach out to them and have a combo about it, because I'll totally watch that.
I should, yeah.
That'd be a great one. Actually, it made me think. I know it's like not totally related. I don't know if you have Hulu, but I was watching. There's a series called Genius, and I was watching the one on Albert Einstein. I think it's like 10 episodes. And I mean, it's based on real life. I don't know how, whatever, but it's just fascinating how, at least in this representation of him, from early in, he's questioning the world in basic, fundamental, like, well, why does light work this way? How does, like, you're just telling me because, like, you can give me this much, but then the other, and he starts questioning these things, and the way that people push back, even within the scientific community, on stuff, even after he's like showing the proof of it. It was really fascinating, but I really enjoyed watching a story of someone who was passionate about questioning the world around them and saying, like, no, like, what's wrong with us? Like, we're here to ask questions. I'm just going to accept things the way they are. So I really enjoyed those episodes really for that part, because, throughout his life, he's constantly being like, it hurts him. Like, he goes to class at a young age, and he's questioning these professors and saying, like, cool, I get you're telling me this part of it, but what happens in this situation? And they're like, well, we don't know. Like, okay, let's talk about it. Like, no, stop. Like, we're here to talk about, like, he's like, no, but, and so, like, it ends up like, they're like, he's getting kicked out of school. So they're not like giving him they're not like helping him find jobs. They're like, it constantly is, people are like, stop, like, you question me, I'm going to punish you for it. And he continues to do it. And, I mean, we all know it works out for him, but it would have broken most people, I think, at a couple points where, like, he just had to have been so discouraged in, like, how many times do you keep doing this and people react negatively that you say, all right, I probably shouldn't keep poking at this, but he kept going, to his credit. And anyway, yeah, if you have Hulu or whatever, or have I don't know if it's like a History Channel or something, but it's called Genius. The Picasso one's okay, but I really enjoyed the Einstein one more. The Picasso season 2. I was like, but yeah. Anyway.
I mean, it sounds good. I haven't heard of it, but it's definitely something that I would want to watch.
Yeah,
I like that stuff.
Give it a shot. But hey, I gotta go.
Right.
Next.
Yeah, me too. I was just gonna say.
Good talk.
Awesome, man. Yeah, thanks for the chat.
Yeah. See you later. Bye.
See you next time.